Morgan Hale paused at the threshold of their small Phoenix apartment, the late morning sun already pushing the thermometer well past 100 Gewirr. A faint breeze rattled the wind chimes hanging by the door, tiny silver discs painted with a single blue hummingbird, the only decoration surviving more than 6 months in this unit. Inside, the air was heavy with humidity and the faint sour sting of mold creeping from the bathroom ceiling. Jonah, her 8-year-old son, trailed behind her, clutching the ceramic bird he'd painted in second grade, the symbol of home hope and every promise she'd made to keep them safe. Morgan ran a hand over the chipped countertop, the one scarred strip of formica that still felt solid beneath her fingertips. It was the same spot where she'd folded her paycheck every 2 weeks, where she'd stared down bills while Jonah did his homework at the table, the clack of his pencils a comforting rhythm in the quiet nights. But today the living room felt different, strained as though the walls themselves were leaning and listening. She set her purse on the sofa and glanced at the folding welcome mat Jonah had painted with mismatched acrylics. Turquoise background, bright yellow sunburst, and the words, "Home Sweet Home." The paint was already peeling from the sun's glare through the single front window. She knelt to smooth one corner, but her finger slipped on a damp patch at the edge. A dark stain beneath the tub upstairs had spread faster than she'd realized, soaking the drywall until it sagged like tired eyelids. Jonah's small voice broke the silence. "Mom, look." He held out the chipped ceramic hummingbird, its painted wings dulled by time. "I found it in the hallway that day Dad moved out. It's always with me so you wouldn't forget." His wide brown eyes met hers, steady and urgent. Morgan swallowed. She remembered the day she'd placed the bird on the welcome mat, a gift from Jonah, to remind her that they still had each other even after the divorce. It was their symbol of resilience. Now it trembled in her palm like a fragile plea. Upstairs, the hallway light flickered. Morgan and Jonah ascended the narrow stairs, careful not to step on the warped carpet leading to their door. Behind it lay everything they owned: Jonah's textbooks, her spare uniform for the medical tech job she'd taken at Mercy Hospital, the little sprig of rosemary in a clay pot on the windowsill, the final survivor of the garden she'd once nurtured on the balcony. She paused at the doorknob. It turned with a slow, reluctant creak. Inside, the apartment smelled of damp, the air conditioner working overtime, but failing to chase the mildew from the corners. Morgan flicked on the overhead light and froze. A crisp white envelope was taped to the front of the refrigerator, the same spot where each month she'd posted the rent receipt. The landlord's typeface was formal, impersonal, notice to vacate property damage. Beneath it, a printed photo of the bathtub ceiling, dark, mottled, and leaking. A 7-day deadline was stamped in red: leave the premises by July 10th. Jonah's eyes grew large. He stepped forward, clutching the hummingbird. "They taped it here on our home." Morgan's throat tightened. The hummingbird slipped from her fingers and clattered to the linoleum. It landed on its side, one wing chipped deeper than before. She knelt to pick it up, but Jonah was already there, pressing his palm to the cool ceramic, as though he could stop the damage from spreading. She drew a breath, tasting the acrid edge of panic. The mercury outside had climbed past 102 degrees, and the only thing hotter in that moment was the fury rising in her chest. "This isn't just mold," she whispered, voice taut. "They're trying to erase us." Jonah stood and placed the hummingbird and rosemary pot side by side on the countertop, their shared emblem of survival. He looked at his mother, his small frame trembling, but unbowed. "Then we have to make them see us," he said, quiet but certain. For a moment, the apartment held its breath. The wind chimes outside stilled, the fluorescent bulb overhead hummed, and only the click of methodical thought filled the stillness. Morgan realized that the fragile symbol Jonah carried was not merely a painted bird, it was the promise of persistence. She rose, smoothing the front of her blouse. There would be phone calls to the property office, emails to management letters hand-delivered if she had to. But first, she and Jonah would visit the courthouse down the street. The notice had pinned their home as a crime scene. they would respond. As they stepped back into the phoenix heat, the sun glinted off the hummingbird's chipped wing. Morgan inhaled deeply, the weight of loss pressing on her chest, but also beneath it a spark of determination. Their symbol had been damaged, but it had not been broken, and neither would they. The hummingbird wind chimes rattled softly in the breeze as mother and son crossed the parking lot. Neither spoke, but their shadows stretched long and steady behind them, carrying the promise of a fight just begun. A few days after their tense stand at the refrigerator, Morgan Hale still felt the heat of that notice pressing on her chest. But her son Jonah, his small shoulders squared in determination, had refused to let the hummingbird slip from his hand. Now in the days that followed, their apartment became a battlefield of indifference. Morgan arrived home one afternoon to find Jonah sitting on the couch, eyes fixed on the glow of his tablet. The tiny ceramic hummingbird lay clipped to the screen, zoomed in so large that its chipped wing dominated the display. Below it scrolled a thread of comments. LOL, kid thinks he's a lawyer. Mold boy for mayor. When your landlord's attorney is better dressed than you. Jonah's lower lip trembled. The living room, already stifling at 104 degrees outdoors, felt colder inside. Morgan set her purse down and joined him on the edge of the sofa, her heart aching as she watched his small fingers swipe past cruel emojis. They made fun of me, he whispered, voice cracking. They called it Mold Boy. She reached out, brushing his hair away. Online trolls don't know you, she said softly. They don't know how brave you were. But he stared at the hummingbird image, the chipped edge magnified across county lines. Mocking laughter caught in the pixels. That evening, Morgan accompanied Jonah to Mar Elementary's PTA meeting, his first time sitting among rows of folding chairs under flickering fluorescent lights. The walls were plastered with bright posters, attendance matters read. 20 minutes a day, and ironically, support our community. She hoped local parents would rally behind her fight, that they'd see beyond the headlines. Instead, when Jonah's name came up during the open mic segment, only 2 people applauded. Sorry, Morgan murmured as Jonah, cheeks pink, took the microphone. I just wanted to share what happened. He lifted the ceramic hummingbird from his pocket, its painted wings dulled by days in his hand. My name is Jonah Hale. My mom asked the landlord to fix the mold in our bathroom. He sent an eviction notice instead. I stood up in court to tell the truth. His voice wavered. A few parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others checked their watches. One father in a pressed khaki shirt chuckled quietly to his wife, who sipped iced tea without looking up. A mother near the door rolled her eyes. Jonah's chest tightened. Morgan felt the symbol of their home, her son's bravery diminishing in that room as surely as the mold spread behind their tub. Afterward, Jonah trudged to her car, hummingbird in hand. The baseball field lights just across the parking lot flickered on, revealing a small cluster of teens tossing softballs. One shouted, "Hey, isn't that the kid from the mold story?" The others laughed. Jonah drew his jacket tighter, as if to shield the bird from their scorn. Back at their apartment, Jonah retreated to his bedroom and closed the door. Morgan found him sitting on the edge of his bed, knees drawn to his chest, the hummingbird balanced in his lap. Why does everyone laugh? He asked, voice muffled. I was just telling the truth. Morgan paused, then sat beside him on the thin mattress. People get uncomfortable when a kid steps up, she said. They'd rather mock than face it themselves. She placed her hand over his. You did the right thing. He nodded, but his gaze fell to the chipped wing. It doesn't feel like courage. That night, Morgan donated half of her savings, enough for a week's rent, to rent an auditorium at the Phoenix Public Library. Under her breath, she promised Jonah that they would have their own forum, a place where his words wouldn't be drowned out by laughter. By morning, she drafted flyers and posted them in every neighborhood cafe between Central and 7th Avenue. Community Forum Tenant Rights and Mold, July 15th, 6 p.m. at Phoenix Public Library, Auditorium A. Meanwhile, social media did not forget. A local blogger stitched together clips of Jonah's courtroom testimony and the PTA meeting into a 3-minute video titled Kid vs. Landlord, the Mushroom Old Boy's Rebuttal. It went viral, 50,000 views by noon, 200 comments per minute, a torrent of praise laced with childish taunts. Parents reposted it on neighborhood Facebook groups with captions like, "Boy genius" or "Troublemaker," and "Can he fix my AC too?" Even the city council member for District 7 shared the link with a wink emoji, adding "impressive kid." Jonah scrolled through the avalanche of notifications, eyes rimmed red. He pressed the ceramic hummingbird against his heart, as if it could stop the flood of cruelty. Outside, Phoenix's afternoon sun pressed against the windows, a relentless 106-degree hug. The hummingbird wind chime on the balcony rattled in the faint breeze, its tiny discs clinking an erratic rhythm. Morgan paused by the open door, watching the chimes shadow dance against peeling stucco. That symbol, the same that had hung above their doorway, now trembled in public view, fractured by jeers and applause in equal measure. Jonah emerged from his room and stood beside her. He reached out, lightly touching the chime. "Mom," he said, voice low. "It's still singing." She knelt, gathering his shoulders. "Always," she replied. "Because even when people mock, the truth rings out." He looked back at the balcony hummingbird and nodded. The chipped angel in his hand seemed to catch the light differently now, less broken, more resolute. When the sun dipped toward the horizon, turning the sky a bruised purple, Morgan slid her arm around Jonah. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll walk into that library auditorium and let them hear your voice again. And this time we'll fill every seat." Jonah closed his eyes briefly. The day had been long, and the echoes of laughter still stung. But as dusk settled over Phoenix and the library's silhouette appeared against the silhouetted skyline, he let the hummingbird rest on his palm. He breathed in the promise of a new stage, and for the first time in days, something like hope flickered in his chest. And somewhere beyond laughing screens and folding chairs, the wind chime sang on. A few evenings after the community forum, Jonah Hale stood beside his mother in their modest living room, the ceramic hummingbird resting on the coffee table as dusk settled over Phoenix. The chatter of the forum still echoed in his mind, the roar of folding chairs scraping, parents whispering, the low hum of the air conditioning, fighting a 107-degree July night. But now an invitation lay on the table, an embossed envelope from Mayor Elena Ramirez's office, summoning them to City Hall tomorrow at 10 a.m. for a tenant advocacy recognition ceremony. The next morning, Morgan and Jonah navigated the polished marble steps of Phoenix City Hall, the heat already radiating off the white columns like an oven floor. They passed beneath the American flag, a single star atop the staff catching the sunlight toward the Grand Rotunda, its dome ceiling echoing every footstep. Jonah's heart pounded a steady drumbeat in his chest, matching the distant click-click of news photographers lining the perimeter. Inside, the rotunda brimmed with local leaders, tenant advocacy volunteers, and a scattering of reporters. The mayor's podium stood front and center beneath a bronze seal of the city. A cluster of ceramic hummingbird wind chimes hung overhead, Morgan's own handiwork, each one painted by children at the library forum, tinkling softly in the circulated air. The sound was delicate but insistent, like hope calling across a canyon. Mayor Ramirez stepped forward in tailored navy suit, her voice resonating through the domed hall. "Today we honor two of our own residents who reminded us that justice is never too small to matter." She motioned to Morgan and Jonah. Cameras flickered. A hush fell as Jonah gripped his mother's hand. Morgan's throat felt tight. The echo of the city council meeting, the PTA, Snickers, the online trolls, all of it, melted into this moment. She had fought a quiet battle for months. Now she and Jonah were the center of a public stage. Mayor Ramirez continued, "When young Jonah Hale stood in court to protect his mother's home, he spoke not only for his family, but for thousands of Phoenix tenants who faced neglect and indifference. And Morgan Hale's persistence illuminated the path. She handed Morgan a framed certificate, Phoenix Tenant Advocate of the Year. The crowd applauded, the vibration rumbling up Jonah's legs. Then came the climax. Behind the podium, the mayor unveiled a bronze plaque mounted on the rotunda wall, the outline of a hummingbird in mid-flight, its wings spread wide with the inscription, "In recognition of courage, small in size, but vast in impact. Phoenix stands with those who speak truth to power." A ribbon was cut. The chimes overhead played once more, their clear song filling the hall. Tears sprang to Morgan's eyes. The hush was profound, no laughter, no mockery, only the soft patter of applause and the click of shutters. At the ceremony's close, Morgan and Jonah stepped down from the dais. Among the guests stood Mason Kellner, the Dalton Properties attorney who had sneered in the courtroom. His crisp navy suit now bore a slightly rumpled sleeve, as though he had walked here from a sleepless night. He approached slowly, voice unsteady. "Ms. Hale, Jonah," he said, extending a hand to Morgan and then to Jonah. I owe you both an apology. I was wrong to dismiss you. Your research, your dedication, it set an example I can no longer ignore." Jonah looked up, surprise softening his features. Morgan accepted Kellner's hand with a gentle nod. The attorney's gaze flicked to the hummingbird plaque, then to Jonah's wide eyes. "If there's any way I can help pro bono consultations policy drafting, I want to." Outside City Hall, the July sun beat down mercilessly, but beneath the rotunda's dome, the air felt lighter, cooler even. The plaque's bronze hummingbird caught the morning light as citizens streamed past, pausing to read its words. On social media, the hashtag #Ischaksh Hummingbird Honor trended stories of tenants supported landlords, reminded of their duties, and messages from children inspired to speak up. Later, as they walked down Washington Street toward the library, Jonah glanced at the old chime dangling from his backpack, strapped the same one he'd brought to City Hall. It caught a breeze and tinkled once. Morgan squeezed his hand. "They heard us," Jonah said quietly. "They did," she replied. And as they turned the corner toward Mar Public Library, the next stage of their journey, already waiting, the distant chime of community voices rose behind them, carrying the promise that small acts of courage can echo far beyond their origin. A light breeze stirred the chimes outside Mar Public Library, their tiny metal hummingbirds singing a gentle tinkle that echoed Jonah's own words at City Hall. He and his mother had just unveiled the bronze plaque beneath the dome, a symbol of their fight and the city's promise to listen. Now, 2 weeks after Mayor Ramirez's ceremony, the rotation of seasons was still 102 summers in Phoenix, but the air in their neighborhood felt warmer with purpose. Morgan Hale stepped onto the pavement in front of the library's side entrance, guiding Jonah toward a row of folding chairs beneath a reclaimed wood awning. Pink bougainvillea vines climbed the brick wall, softening the concrete facade. Local volunteers arranged clear acrylic cases on a long table, each case containing a small ceramic hummingbird, hand-painted by tenants and advocates at the forum, alongside laminated copies of mold statutes and tenant rights flyers. A hand-lettered banner proclaimed Hummingbird Heritage Project, preserving, home protecting, community. Jonah paused, inspecting one case where his own chipped hummingbird sat beside the original legal pad he'd used in court. His name and age, Jonah Hale, age 8, were printed on a brass plaque beneath it. He traced the outline of the chipped wing under glass as though it were a treasure. Morgan knelt beside him. "You see what this is?" she asked. "It's not just about the day you spoke up. It's about all the people who'll speak up after you." He nodded, the hum of library patrons drifting through the open doors behind him. Inside, shelves of books bore witness to years of quiet learning. Now the library had become a sanctuary for tenant education. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the doors opened for the first workshop, Building Safe Homes. A line of neighbors, many carrying water bottles and folding fans against the 108 glare, wound along the walkway. Among them were families clutching photos of leaking ceilings, single parents with stacks of rent receipts, and a handful of elderly residents in wide-brimmed hats seeking advice on aging in place. Inside the air-conditioned hall announced by a brass sign reading, Community Room A, the hummingbird cases were arranged around 3 seminar tables. Morgan took the podium first, her voice calm but firm. Welcome, everyone. Today we honor the courage that saved one family's home, and we commit to making sure no other family faces eviction because of neglect. She tapped the podium twice for emphasis. The Hummingbird Heritage Project is our pledge to keep these stories alive and to equip every tenant with the knowledge to protect their homes. She passed the microphone to Jonah, whose small frame and bright eyes drew a collective hush. He held the mic with both hands. I started studying the law because I had to, he began. But you don't have to be 8 years old to learn your rights. We made these hummingbirds to remind us small voices matter. He lifted his own case, letting the sun glint off the polished glass. If no one else speaks, you can. A ripple of applause swept through the room. A retired postal worker named Carla raised her hand. How can we help? She asked. Will you share these workshops in Glendale and Tempe? Morgan exchanged a glance with Jonah and smiled. That's the plan, she said. By September, we'll have rotating sessions at Montoya Community Center and Deer Valley Library. She flipped through a printed schedule on the lectern, dates, times, and contact numbers. Over the next 2 hours, tenants learned to document repairs with smartphone timestamps, draft formal repair requests, and navigate small claims court. Jonah drifted between tables, answering questions with the same calm confidence he'd shown at 8. You email the office first, then send a certified letter. Make sure your photos are dated. A woman in a wheelchair nodded fiercely as she scribbled notes. Outside, a U-Haul truck rolled by with rented chairs for the next session under the awning. Morgan stepped into the library courtyard to call Mayor Ramirez's office, confirming plans to install a permanent hummingbird heritage display near the council chambers. As she spoke, she glanced at the chimes overhead. Each clink was a reminder of how far they'd come. Inside Community Room. Jonah closed the final workshop by reading from his highlighted legal pad. A safe home is more than shelter. It's dignity, security, and the promise that someone will answer when you call. His words settled like warm light over the assembled neighbors. That evening back at their apartment, Morgan and Jonah hung a small brass plate beside the front door, home of the hummingbird legacy. Jonah helped level the plate with a small carpenter's level he'd borrowed from a neighbor. When he stepped back, the plate caught the porch light, its polished surface reflecting the chipped hummingbird charm dangling from the doorknob. A new addition painted bright yellow with Morgan's name etched beneath. Jonah turned to look at his mother. Do you think anyone will forget? He asked. Morgan wrapped her arm around him. They won't, she said softly. Because every time someone sees that hummingbird, they'll remember that small voices can start big changes. In the stillness of their home, the chime from the hallway wind chime sounded once a deliberate, gentle call to memory and to action. And in that moment, Jonah understood that legacy wasn't just the symbol they'd crafted together. It was the countless future voices echoing his promise, if no one else speaks, I will.